Hi guys, so welcome to podcast. I say this almost every single time I do a podcast, but basically the reason why I started this podcast not too long ago is because I wanted to share with you guys more of what it is that I experience when I apply some of the biomechanical principles that we learn in my program to my daily life, to my process of healing, to my process of building relationships, to my process of dealing with self-esteem issues and confidence issues and all of that. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is that, I've recently, like on the 8th of June, it was the 4-year anniversary of Move True. So 4 years ago, during the pandemic, I started this program. And as you guys know, during the pandemic, I started it online. I built this platform and didn't see anyone face to face, but just created this online presence. And I've done my very best since the very beginning to put my authentic self out there. But as for those of you who've been with me for a while know, it's been a process of learning how to do that, how to really bring my most authentic self, my most truthful self to the foreground. I've gotten better at that over time because I wasn't always so good, even though I've always tried. And one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is how difficult it is to actually do that with social media, because social media is really like this highlights reel of our lives, like in most cases. And even when you try not to have it be that way, it still ends up being that way. Like if you guys think about how what I've posted in the last week and a half since I've gotten to Europe, it's, homemade food and cute Italian suburb rendezvous and like excursions to Milan and then dancing and flamenco in Marbella, and like, that's just my highlights reel from this trip, because the reality, as you guys know from the title of this video, is quite different. So that's one of the reasons why I also want to continue doing these podcasts, because I feel I've gotten a lot of comments from you guys that it's really relatable, and that there are a lot of things that we all go through, shitty things, but most people don't talk about it. Most people don't talk about it, and they definitely don't tend to talk about it on social media. And this is one of the reasons why I really think that podcast is a very valuable part of my program. And if you guys haven't watched the first podcast, I think it's been like 9 of them now, go ahead and watch those, and maybe what I'll say in this podcast will make a little bit more sense. Anyway, long story short, you guys know that I arrived in Europe and we planned for about a 2-week trip here where, we meet his family, my partner Anton's family, which has been wonderful. And we deal with some visa stuff for him, last things to do for that, so we can go back to the United States. Taking a trip to Marbella, seeing the beautiful like oceanside, town Marbella, and then taking dance lessons with our teachers there. There are 4 of them. We just came back from Marbella. That's been like the plan, like traveling around Milan a little bit. Anyway, but on day 1, no, technically day 2, when we arrived here, my partner had a visa interview. His visa was already approved to work and live in the United States. We just need to do this interview. 99.9% of the time, there's no issue. However, my partner did not pass this interview. It was a huge shock for both of us. And it just threw our plans out the window. So basically, he cannot return to the United States right now until we find a way for him to reapply, submit evidence, gathering new evidence first, and hopefully, passing another round of interview. Although we're not really sure when that will be, because he needs to gather all of the new evidence, okay with the lawyer, reapply, then select an interview date in a different place, maybe Florence. I think we're going to try that, or Rome. And yeah, and then wait for the results of the interview, you know, after doing that. So anyway, long story short, he's not going back to the United States anytime in the near future. And that happened on the second day of our trip here. So, and it was very, very unexpected. Like he didn't expect to have, he didn't have a plan B because he didn't expect it. I don't have a plan B because didn't expect it. And yeah, so this is hence the stuck in Europe thing, because if I can go back to the United States, but if I go back to the United States and he can't, our career is gonna just be on pause, right? And so the problem is I didn't think that I would be stuck here. So I didn't even bring my laptop. I don't have my web camera. I'm filming this on my phone, but it's hard to do the classes, you know, on my phone because I can't see you guys. I don't even have my toothbrush charger. I've got 2 cats at home too. That's like the main thing. I don't really have a long-term babysitter because they're my babies. So yeah. And what else? Like so many things. I did not take care of, you know, anything at home basically for being in Europe for I don't know how many months we're going to be here. So I've been trying to deal with that. And I'm flying to Stockholm in a few days, of all places, because a very loving, kind community member went to my apartment to grab all the stuff that I really, really need, like my computer and whatnot, and is flying it to Stockholm because she's going to Sweden, and I'm going to meet her there to get it. But still, you know, like my cats need a lot of attention and affection, and I don't have anybody to like spend time with them, and I won't see them for a very long time. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a crazy time. And on top of that, when we went to Marbella, I got food poisoning and it was really terrible. And we've tried to make the best out of every situation, but it's been very trying. And on top of that, you know, as you guys can see, I'm in a bathroom, and the reason is because we are in the middle of nowhere in the suburbs of Italy, Milan, and we live with his family. And you know, like I love his family, but it's a very small European apartment, and there are a lot of people, and there are 2 dogs, and we're sleeping on the couch in the living room next to the kitchen. And it's hard because like I need space even from my own parents, you know, a lot of space, let alone someone else's parents, right? But it's been hard to live anywhere else because we need to find an apartment, but it needs to be close to the dance studio. It cannot be in central Milan because the dance studio is far out away from central Milan. And my partner, because he's stuck here, he has no work. And so we have to be very careful with money because he was teaching like 40-50 lessons a week in New York, and now suddenly it drops to 0. There's nothing. Like, we're really grateful that we even have a place to stay, that he doesn't have to pay for, that we have food and warmth and support like all day long from his family. So we're very lucky for that. But it's just hard because I'm not, like I told him, this is very different from what I'm used to, because I'm used to living in a much bigger space with my own space and blah, 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 right? It's hard when you're like a 31-year-old woman and you feel like you're living in someone's living room, and, you know, his mom is asking you if you want this and you want that, and you feel so bad because if you feel like you're being like serviced because you're a guest, but yet you're a long-term guest. So it just feels like I'm a burden on them, and I don't want to be a burden. But anyway, let's go back to the whole point of this podcast, which is not just to give you guys sort of like a life update on how this nightmarish trip is going. It's so funny because I was posting on Instagram that this is like the European trip of a lifetime, and it certainly is the European trip of a lifetime because it has been the most interesting, unexpected trip I've ever had in my entire life. So anyway, the point of this podcast, I guess, is that one of the main things, one of the main themes of all of these podcasts has been this like inner child healing, has been this understanding of myself and why I struggle with self-esteem issues or confidence issues, why I struggle in my relationships to maintain the love, and why it is that my marriage of 5 years failed, and what I learned from that experience, and how I'm continuing to learn about myself, and to grow awareness for myself in my new relationship. So this has been like a theme. These are some of the themes that the podcast has been touching upon. And one of the things that I feel that this trip is really making me open my eyes to is that, like, first of all, there are so many similarities, or I would say signs, I could say signs from the universe about this trip, that remind me of there's just so many signs. Like, for example, my partner is Ukrainian, but we are in Italy, right? And Italy is where I met my ex for the first time, like 6 years ago. I actually flew to Malpensa, Milan to meet him. Like, the first few days here were a little bit triggering because I was like, everything reminds me of how we met, you know? And then I told you guys on in my stories that last time I was sick, the last time I ever had food poisoning in my entire life was 3 years ago when I went to Marbella. Sorry, there's an airplane. 3 years ago when I went to Marbella with my ex for dancing. Like, what are the chances that I would get food poisoning one more time, right? Like, that's really, really weird. It's super, super weird. And then on top of that, we have this huge bad news. And honestly, I feel like it's we were just laughing about it earlier, my partner and I, because it feels like the pandemic. Like, we can't go anywhere because we don't have a car. We're stuck in the suburbs. We're stuck at home basically all day, except for when we can go to the studio to practice. Life has slowed down. I mean, the anxiety that I had, by the way, because life has suddenly slowed so much. Like, I don't have anything to do. I don't have my computer. I don't have like my books. I don't have my cats. I don't have anything. And we're in the suburbs of Italy, right? It feels like the pandemic. It feels like the pandemic, and my partner has lost all his work. And I'm like, okay, what can I do with my program? What kind of content can I create? I'm like trying to refocus on my work. And it reminds me of like the pandemic when my ex, lost all his work and I was focusing on my stuff, and things were falling apart because, for many reasons, because, a man without work is not a fun man to be around, because he doesn't feel confident that he can sustain himself. And so it's been a really, really hard trip on our relationship so far. But yet at the same time, like, I'm like, there are so many similarities. Like, this is a sign from the universe. Like, we did not expect any of these things to happen, but this is a sign from the universe. I feel that, like, the universe is telling me, I'm going to give you the same situations. I'm going to give you the same hardships. And this time you can choose if you want to be different. This time you can choose how you want to handle these problems. I'm going to give them to you again, and you can choose how you want to handle it. And in a way, like, so, on the title of this video, I said we almost broke up, because we really did. Like, we almost split on a personal level, because from the moment that we had the bad news about the interview, like, both he and I were so stressed, and we were just getting into everything was really fragile. Like, we would erupt into a fight, like, over one statement or a tone of voice. Like, we had really good moments, which you saw on my Instagram, and then it would be like the flip. Like, we would just erupt into an argument over something, because he and I were both very, very stressed. And so we were fighting, like we had like 5 or 6 huge fights, and it's only been like not even 2 weeks that we've been here. And at one point, like, he was like, oh, I just can't do this anymore because I just feel that you're very selfish. And he kept saying this. So like the overall theme, I won't get into the details of the fights and what we were fighting about, but the overall theme was that he felt like I was being selfish. And this is not the first time that people have told me that I'm selfish. Like my boyfriends have told me that I'm selfish. And it obviously really hurts me because I don't think of myself as a selfish person. But after digging a little bit more deeply, because, you know, I was about to lose this man, I was like, why is he like, why do people feel that way, you know? And the thing is, like, I am an only child. So a lot of you guys know this, but I am an only child. And I was raised in a very externally driven, sort of achievement-oriented way. So it's very difficult. And I grew up also in the United States, right? I was born in the United States and I grew up in America. That's very different than someone who grows up maybe in a different country, in a different culture. And what I realized about myself is that I really tend to view situations, I really tend to say things and make suggestions and comment based on the fact that I'm like a 31-year-old mature, successful woman who grew up in the United States, who has a family to go back to, a home to go back to, a family who can support me financially if worst case scenario. I never ask them for money, but like worst case scenario, right? They're in the United States and they can help. And I'm always coming from this perspective. Like no matter what, like the little things, the big things, I'm always sort of coming from this perspective. And it's really hard for me to put myself in the shoes of like someone who is a man who is 21 years old, who lost one home and may lose another home, right? Who has no work and who has no family who can financially support his dancing or whatnot. Like I never really spent much energy to put myself in his shoes or anyone else's shoes. It's very different from me. And so like in the past, you know, I've always been someone who sort of just, when I'm laser focused on what it is that's important to me and how I want to make sure that it happens well, like I really am laser focused, and it's hard for me to see and have empathy for others. And this is something that I realized about myself, you know, and I mean, of course, I've gotten way better, okay? So being a little bit nicer to myself is one of the things like that I'm working on, being kinder in the way that I speak to myself. The truth of the matter is that I have gotten way better. So I was like, it's so funny because in Marbella, when we had that huge fight that we almost split after that, I was like speaking to my friend. I have a really wonderful client. She used to be a client, now she's just a really good friend. And I was talking to her on the phone about this fight, and I was like crying and to her over the phone, which by the way is, I talked about vulnerability in the last podcast, but I've gotten way more vulnerable with the people around me. And I was just asking her for help. And she told me, you know, like, you are a good person, you know, like you had such a shit day and the first thing you did was ask me how my day is. And she's like, don't beat yourself up about the fact that you are not perfect, right? We talked about this a lot in the podcast, and you still have work to do, but you've come a long way. And I feel, she said to me, I feel that you care about me. Like I feel that you care about people other than yourself. And it just like, So I know that I've come a long way. I used to be much more self-absorbed and much more selfish. And my coach, Alan Tornsberg, who's known me since the very beginning, we actually had a really teary-eyed 2 lessons with him talking about our partnership and how to deal with this really hard time, because we were like, it wasn't, we were just destroying ourselves basically. And he goes, Jessica, like you've changed quite a bit, because in the past, I swear, like my impression of you was that you would just walk over dead bodies to get to wherever you wanted to go. And I was like, oh, that's terrible that you thought that way. But yeah, I think I definitely gave that impression. And so, like, long story short, I realized why it is that, people have called me selfish in the past, why it is that my partner tells me that I'm selfish and that it really hurts him, especially in such a difficult time for him. And so this has been like a huge learning experience for me on really how to love better, how to really be more supportive from the point of view of empathy or compassion. And like, for example, you guys know from my previous podcasts that my ex most likely, although I don't know the exact date, but most likely started the betrayal or the cheating on me, at least on an emotional level, during the pandemic, when he lost all of his work and I started my business and I didn't pay any attention to our marriage, and he, was just there and I was just in my own thing, and I feel like, again, this is such a similar situation. And how do I navigate this situation in a way that is like sensitive and supportive? I mean, at the end of the day, it's not my responsibility to make him feel confident, but he is, I think every single man who loves his woman and who desires to make her happy, I think every single man cares about what I feel about him and what I think of him and whether or not I'm behind him. And I just wasn't sensitive in these last days to the fact that he's really taken a huge blow to his confidence as a man, because he's suddenly without work, he's suddenly without a home, that he knows that he can go back to. It's really like time for me to step up as a woman, not as a princess, right, who wants to be taken care of all the time and coddled and spoiled, right? It's time for me to be a real woman, because at the end of the day, like, I don't want to be a princess, okay? I want to be a queen. And I know that sounds really kind of cheesy, but the thing is that a queen is worshipped, but she's also indispensable because of her compassion, her ability to hold space, because of her strength and also her power. And she is a giver and she is a receiver, but she's not a taker. And I used to be such a taker in all of my relationships in the past, in all of my partnerships. And I feel that, the only princess you can be is your father's princess. That is what I talked about in the previous podcasts, like the first one about my relationship with my dad and how I've been subconsciously in the past looking for him in all of the men that I've been with. But the only, way that I can be a princess is with my father, and that time is come to an end. Now it's time to be a queen, and a queen cannot be a queen without a king, and it's important that I make my man feel like a king, and therefore he will worship me like a queen. And I think that this is a lesson that is hard for me, because I I'm very much like my mother. I'm very strong, I'm very independent. I grew up in America. I really don't need anyone. I really don't need a man. This is, but it's hard for a man to hear that, because it's not just about being men or being woman. It's also like everybody wants to feel that they're needed in some way, that they're valued and that they're respected. Even if the reality is that I don't need a man, I would like to have one. It's nice to have one, It's nice to have someone to protect you and to take care of you and to solve your problems, to help solve your problems for you, So you don't have to do everything on your own, because at the end of the day, we cannot do life alone. We need people in our life. And yeah, I don't want to go too much into sort of like gender roles and things like that, because everybody has their own system and I respect that. But I feel like my nature, my partner and I were talking about this in the car the other day, but it's my coach said that like people in the dance industry have said that I'm like a man stuck in a woman's body. And I feel that that's like a really interesting thing to say, but in some ways it is true. I feel that I was brought up like a man, like I was brought up like a boy. And all the skills that I spent most of my energy developing as I grew up, like leadership and competitiveness and problem solving and organization and decision making, all of this stuff, it's very masculine. And I didn't spend a lot of time developing more feminine qualities. But by nature, I'm very motherly, I'm very nurturing, I'm very gentle, I'm very caring. By nature, I'm actually not competitive. All of these things that make me very masculine are, I would say they're more like it could be my defense mechanisms, actually, because when I feel like I'm not enough, I really go into a lot of masculine qualities like aggression and control and decision making. I go into a lot of these behaviors that are very destructive for my personal relationships, especially in a ballroom dance partnership. And but when I feel like I'm enough, I soften, I become flexible, I'm gentle, I'm nurturing, I'm caring, I'm motherly, right? You guys know that I have like this side of me, and it kind of yo-yos, and it yo-yos based on my stress level, my self-esteem, my confidence, my feelings of enoughness. So yeah, and therefore I've been working on trying to just understand myself better in this way. One of the things that really struck me was that when we almost broke up, it was he had enforced very clear personal boundaries with me and said, this has crossed my personal boundary and I don't think we should do this anymore, and I think we should focus on our dance partnership. And it was hard in the moment for me to not panic to death and just like listen to what these boundaries were and try to figure out how it was that we crossed those boundaries. But basically he was saying to me like, I have a personal boundary that I just don't want to fight. I don't want to fight frequently, he said, to the point, and to escalate those fights to the point where we cancel dance lessons or we cancel dance competitions. And he said, if we can't control our fights to a point where we, can preserve our dance lessons and competitions, then we need to end this personal relationship. That was one of his boundaries. Another one of his boundaries related is that, for him, he said, life is very stressful. We have a lot of problems. If we cannot spend, his ratio is 80-20, like 80% of the time happy and at peace, 20% of the time in conflict and unhappiness. If we can't maintain that ratio and this ratio flips, which is what it's done for, a couple weeks, then that's also a boundary for me. Then that signals to me that we are not able to make this work. Because for him, he said to me a really long time ago, he said, I would rather be alone than be in a relationship that's toxic or be in a relationship that is unhappy most of the time. But I didn't realize that it was such a clear boundary. Those boundaries were so clear for him until this time. Like, I was basically begging because I was like, he was really committed to saving this dance partnership by ending our personal relationship, and it was like very, very, very scary for me. But at the end, he communicated his boundary clearly to me, and I was like, okay, now I understand your boundaries. Thank you for telling me. I think I can find a solution to this. And because what I learned is, first of all, because it was so volatile, like anything can turn into a fight, and that fight could escalate. I was like, it takes two to make a fight. It takes two to make a fight. That was my way of pushing responsibility off of myself. What I realized is that actually, yes, it takes two people to escalate a fight, but it can also just take one person to make sure that fight doesn't escalate. And I decided that for now, and let's see how long, I can do this for, but so far it's working very well. I was like, maybe I should be that person, right? Like, I'm not in a situation right now where I have no way to procure income. I have no home to go back to. I'm not in that position. So let me take responsibility for now to be the one to prevent that fight from escalating. So when I feel that the tension is rising and he starts to get upset about something that I've said or whatnot, I just say, I just immediately change my tone of voice, and I give a little bit of space, and I say, okay, baby, okay. So I immediately change, instead of going and being the one to, yeah, but why did you say it that way? Like, no, I don't think you're right about that. I just de-escalate. I don't know how else to explain it. I actively de-escalate the situation. So, sorry, I didn't do a very good job of explaining, but this was my solution. I take responsibility that in situations where there is increasing tension, I actively de-escalate the situation with things like changing my tone of voice, quieting down. This is why I wrote in my journal, like, let's just quiet down. Let's not talk so much, like, let's just quiet down. Or if I talk, let's talk in a gentle voice. Okay, I understand. I'm listening. I hear you. Tell me more. Tell me more. I mean, these are the kinds of things that when you say it in a gentle way, it just de-escalates the tension. It de-escalates the tension. Or to remove myself from the situation. So for example, I temporarily lost my an item of clothing, and it like really bugged me. And I could feel the stress, because it wasn't just stress about the clothing that I lost, it was also stress about everything, right? I could feel myself being stressed, and he's like, come down to eat lunch with me. And I came down to see him, and I realized, okay, my stress is still there. So I just said, baby, I'm gonna order my food, and I'm gonna go upstairs and look for this thing. I'm gonna look for this item of clothing, and when I'm done looking for it, I will come back. So I removed my negative, stressful self from his space, and I went upstairs, and I spent a while looking for it, and finally I did find it. But then I felt myself de-stress, I felt myself calm down, and then I came back, right? But it's funny, because a few days prior, something similar happened, and instead of removing myself from the space, I stayed in his space and tried to pretend like I wasn't stressed, but he could feel it, and then as soon as there was something, it went into a fight. So I learned from that, and I said, I'm going to remove myself from this space, and that way is another way to de-escalate the tension. So I'm learning these things. This is just the beginning, and I thought I would share these tactics with you, but in case, you can relate. But this is the most sort of critical period of, I think, my life and partnership. I have no idea when we're going back to the United States. I have no idea how we're going to sort of navigate the next few weeks, the next few months. I mean, there are so many good things. I mean, we have his family here, we have delicious food, we have a studio that's open that we can practice like 6-7 hours a day. It doesn't matter because he doesn't have work and I don't have much work either, or it's flexible at least. So we have a lot of time to work on our dancing, but all of those things can't be very good unless we deal with, you know, like when you're under a really stressful pressure situation, you can say like true colors come out, but I like to think of it as like it really puts you to the test and you really need to deal with a lot of the issues that you were dealing with, that you hadn't dealt with yet because things were going too smooth exteriorly, you know, like externally, I mean. And so now I'm really looking at my this theme that I have of tending to be selfish. I'm really looking at this theme I have of tending to go into an unhealthy feminine when I'm stressed or under pressure, of, you know, being controlling and perfectionistic and blaming and aggressive, etc. I'm really starting to look at, I'm really looking at sort of like how can I be more responsible in this relationship? Like how can I empower myself as a woman in this relationship to be a queen, to be in control in the right way of myself, of being able to de-escalate a situation, of being able to make someone just melt, right, when they're stressed or in also an attack mode, etc. And yeah, I'm still learning. This is an interesting sort of period, and I'm going to keep you guys updated through the podcast, but as you guys have noticed, there's a lot more content coming now with biomechanics on my page. I just realized that I forgot to say like 2 things in the podcast. I knew I would forget. But basically the first thing is that when I said, like, you know, when I was talking about how my partner has really clear boundaries, it's quite important to have boundaries. That's one thing that my ex like didn't have. His way of, remember I told you that when we are afraid of being truly vulnerable, we will go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawn being people pleasing, which is another way of, you know, basically not having boundaries. So his defense against being vulnerable was to people please and not have boundaries. So he was always pleasing me from the beginning of our relationship until the end, and I could never, the scary thing about my ex was that I never really knew what he really wanted. I never really knew who he really was, what he really wanted, if he really liked something or if he really didn't like something. It was really hard for me to tell because he would just do whatever I wanted. And like that's the thing about this whole like being a princess versus being a queen. You know, sometimes I miss that feeling of someone sort of bending to my every will because they love me, because I think that's unconditional love, because it reminds me so much of my father's love. But that's not mature love, that's not realistic love, and that's not sustainable love in a relationship with someone. And that is, you know, because my partner has clear boundaries, but yet I can feel how much he loves me, because I never saw a man cry like the way he cried when we were breaking up. Like, I never saw someone cry like that before, a man in front of me. I could feel how much he loved me and how much it hurt him to have to sort of like cut the leg to save the body, so to speak. But he also made his boundaries super, super clear. And this is the reason why I was able to grow and able to realize my selfishness, able to come up with these solutions of how to de-escalate things, because I understood his boundary. I understood what was fine for him and what wasn't fine, so that I could learn to love him better. And that was something that my ex never did. And so in a way, like, my partner gives me tough love, and it makes me better as a lover. But my ex, I just couldn't, I actually became more and more selfish over time. Like, it was hard for me to grow because you have this person who just wants to please you. And, you know, again, I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying that it's in a mature, sustainable kind of relationship, you know, you have to have boundaries. That's the very first thing I wanted. That's the thing that I forgot to say in the podcast before. But also the other thing is that, why am I even making a podcast and telling you guys about all of these things, working on all of these things? Why am I so dead set on growing myself, not just in dancing, but in every other way? I really 150% believe that when we're working on these things internally, it will affect our dancing. Like, am I ever going to achieve the deepest, most meaningful level of self-expression in my dancing if I really don't know who I am, if I'm not evolving to be even more my true authentic self, not the scared inner child or angry inner teenager that is like full of defense mechanisms? You know, like, I know that working on this is going to help my dance partnership and help my dancing. That's why I'm doing it, because I can feel and see like how these internal changes manifest in my dancing. And I think all of you guys can see that too, how much I've changed in my dancing since in the last year, you know, since I met my partner. And I know that as I continue to get to know myself, as I continue to learn to love myself and grow my self-esteem, that's just gonna make my dancing so much more radiant and so much. And so this is sort of like, you can call this the final chapter of my career, so my competitive career at least. And the last thing I'm focused on is my dance technique, you know, because the only thing that's holding me back at this point is not my mechanics. It's not what I'm doing with my body. It's what I'm doing up here and how I'm relating that to my body. So yeah. Anyway, so that's that. I just wanted to insert it in here. And yeah, I will see you guys soon. Hopefully next time I'm doing the podcast, I will be in a slightly more stable state in my life.